So what I'm aiming to as an opening topic first is about the censoring of Jimmy Kimmel and him getting fired and why that's like a supported initiative, and I agree with that. It's the first topic I want to hit on. Second topic I want to hit on is the fact that it's a good idea to return American manufacturing back to the United States of America. And the third topic I want to hit on is the fact that I think that the Supreme Court's ruling on President Trump's immunity was justified. So that's kind of why I want to go through them. Easiest one first is, and I think this is like pretty straightforward, I don't think you can argue that Jimmy Kimmel's censoring wasn't justified. He was spreading misinformation live on air. Okay, I know a lot of people were complaining about the fact that it was related to Charlie Kirk's death, and that's what you keep hearing on the conservative side of things. They keep drumming on and on and on about it. But from my perspective, being on the right, it was more about the fact that he straight up said that that the guy was a MAGA shooter, right? He said this was one of MAGA's own, right? And he said that in the speech. You can look at it. I see a lot of head nods in the room. You can look at it specifically. He says this was a MAGA shooter. And it wasn't a joke. And here's the thing. When you spread misinformation on your side, I think it's perfectly valid to be deplatformed.
Okay, hold on. I would applaud that, maybe. Okay, so the first thing, okay, I'm going to try this. Okay, what is the, where do you normally get your news from?
Honestly, this is going to sound crazy, but I usually cycle around between a lot of different news sources. So I check out extreme right-wingers like Gavin McInnes, right? I check out some America First stuff. And then I also check out some left-wingers like Hassan, Vosh. I scroll through some of your stuff too on occasion. It's just that it's really important to get a good gaze of what the political spectrum's like and what the people around me are thinking. So
okay. So Jimmy Kimmel, the reason I asked is because Jimmy Kimmel absolutely did not say that that guy was a MAGA shooter. What Jimmy Kimmel said was that it was, I'm paraphrasing slightly, but it was something along the lines of after this information has come out, Trump and the MAGA people are doing everything they can to label this guy as anything but their own.
Yeah.
That's what he said.
Okay.
That statement is true.
Yeah, if they're doing anything to label him but their own,
yes,
the implication there is that he was a MAGA shooter.
I mean,
how is that not the implication?
So, being good faith, you can argue that that could be an implication. You could take that from that.
What is the implication you took from that then?
Well, the explicit meaning, what he's saying is that they're doing everything they can to make it so he's not one of their own. That is true. The second the shooting happened, before we knew anything about this, Vance, Trump, and everybody else was already declaring that it was like a crazy trans shooter, that the person was like a left-wing extremist. We didn't know anything about it. They were doing anything they could to make it so that he wasn't one of their own. That is what they were doing.
Okay. That's I feel like it's a little disingenuous on the wording, because the implication there is, from my perspective, that he is implying that if they're doing everything to make him seem like he's not his own, there's implicit guilt in that statement, right? Because he was talking and he opened up. I watched the entire thing.
Yep.
He opened up talking about the shooting, and basically the right wing's response to it was to make it seem like it wasn't their own. Right?
Which was the response, and it was disgusting.
Yeah, but if the implication is that the right isn't trying to make it seem like it's their own shooter, then the implication is that it is one of their own.
Like I said, if you're being super good faith, I understand how somebody could take that from it, but I think that my interpretation is just as valid, because explicitly and factually it was true. They were doing everything to label this guy as not a MAGA person as soon as they could.
If you could pull two different types of perspectives from the same type of line delivery, don't you think there's an issue with the delivery in itself, right? If he's appealing...
I understand what I'm saying. I'm just saying, firstly, I'm just saying that what he said explicitly was true.
Okay.
We can argue that the implication maybe was that kind of like you're saying it was a MAGA shooter, although he didn't say that anywhere else in his opening speech or anything. We could argue that you could take it from that, right?
Who's Jimmy Kimmel's main audience, would you argue, on the political spectrum?
It's probably going to be boomerish people.
Yeah, but on the political spectrum, who is he largely going to be probably seen
My guess is going to lean nowadays probably quite a bit to the left.
Yeah, right. So when Trump goes on stage and he says we're going to fight like hell, and you claim that that's being... violent rhetoric and other things, right? And you call out the fact that because of his base being violent, that's the way his base is going to interpret it. When left-wingers hear Jimmy Kimmel say the right is doing everything they can to not blame one of their own, the implication there to a left-wing audience is going to be that he's one of their own, right? And we see this before you continue. Just one second. the headlines you see from the left and prominent people that are tweeting left and right, or at the intro of it saying, this guy grew up in a Mormon family, he's a right-wing shooter. That was a prominent narrative
I never
on
heard
the
it.
left.
I don't think I saw any major publication say that he was a right-wing shooter.
I'm not saying major publications. I'm talking
I
about...
can't speak for all of the randos on Twitter that you guys love to obsess over. But no major publication said that he was a right-wing shooter. But there was a lot of information that if any of it had been any different, you guys would have been screaming it from the rooftops. If this guy came from like a far-left libtarded household, if this guy came from like the school of like transgender, if this guy came from whatever else, then it would have been like every single thing you guys would have screeched. But it was kind of strange that it was like a shooter who seemed relatively normal. It was a white dude, came from seemed like a conservative household, a very conservative household, you guys love it, he went to trade school, so he didn't have a chance to get fully radicalized in college. Like all of these things are true. Also, and now we're not talking about or hearing about much of it anymore because it seems like nothing came out to show that he was like the hardcore left-winger that they wanted him to be initially. Yeah, I mean, all I'm saying is that if we could argue, right? When I listened to Jimmy Kimmel's full statement, I immediately understood, what he was saying because it's true because I'd watched it. I'd watched conservatives do this. They were making statements about who the shooter was. Nancy Mace said the Democrats owned this before we knew anything about the shooter. It was crazy.
I know, but if you're going to sit here and critique the right's ability to run with headlines and run with stories like claiming that the shooter was trans and all these other things that we saw in the aftermath of the shooting, and you're going to say that like, well, like it's whatever because like I could kind of play the same game and be like, well, their audience just took the wrong message.
No,
right?
You can't play that game because when somebody says the Democrats own this, or when they say the shooter was probably part of Trans-Tifa, there's not much room for interpretation there. Number one. Number two, Jimmy Kimmel is a late-night talk show radio host. We're comparing that to the president, the vice president, sitting members of Congress, the head of the FBI.
I mean, do you not think that there's like some importance in the position that Jimmy Kimmel is in, though, with having a wide like audience of like left-wingers?
I would never admit that to a conservative who says there's no importance in anything that the president of the United States says.
Well, I will admit there is importance to the president of the United States.
Okay, then in that case, I would say
in mind,
I would say that Jimmy Kimmel probably could have been a bit clearer with his statement, so that you couldn't take that bad interpretation from it. But we're nowhere near the level of like this should be forcibly censored off all of everything, and he should be fired for it, considering the government traditionally never engages in that type of behavior. And if they did, Fox News wouldn't be on air.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with what you're saying for the most part, but there's like the highlights there where I just think like it's important that like misinformation is kind of not like spread around. And when like...
That's fine, but we already said that the government can't do this, right?
With what?
Do anything about misinformation. Conservatives have just spent the past 5 years crying and screaming and bitching about YouTube banning people and Facebook banning people and X banning people and free speech has to be absolute. So now the government is going to... Also, this is, as much as conservatives hate to talk about it, this is also why decorum and the speech of your president is important, is because for me, I'm a reasonable person. I'm an American citizen. When I see that my, conservatarded president has been screeching and screaming about people like Jimmy Kimmel and Steve Colbert and these other guys over and over again, and then I see him move to deplatform them when they say something, well, in my mind, I think any reasonable person go, kind of looks like government censorship, especially when he's pointing to two people that have gotten canceled that he politically hates, and he's calling for more next.
I mean, I kind of agree with you, but then, I mean, wouldn't you argue like the deplatforming of like Trump on Twitter would be a form of government censorship?
No.
Why not?
Because the government didn't push for that. Twitter did.
But like when it comes to like, and MSNBC, I'm not sure actually who Jimmy Kimmel was hosted by, I forgot. But like when they push for it, they're a private company. How can it be government censorship?
Because the reason why they pulled his show was because the head of the FCC was talking to all of these huge, not conglomerate, not corporate, what's the word I'm looking for? The huge syndication networks, Sinclair, and there was one other large one, saying that he might consider pulling their licenses or whatever if they continued to run Jimmy Kimmel's show.
Well, I mean, if they took the interpretation that I did, because he wasn't very careful with his wording, and they felt like he was spreading misinformation online, then I feel like it's justified for the FCC to intervene in the type of a situation, because I think misinformation crackdowns are something that we should push for.
I don't think you believe this
I
statement.
do.
So you would be okay with the government, would you be okay with the removing of the entirety of Fox News after the Dominion lawsuit stuff?
Certain portions of it, yeah.
The entirety, the whole thing would have to go. The whole network was
certain
complicit.
Hosts, for the record, certain hosts...
It was basically like 7 hosts and all of the Fox execs were all implicated in that lawsuit.
Certain hosts were fired, right? So we had Tucker Carlson.
Tucker left.
They left, but basically the implication is they were removed. I mean, if you cost a company like several $1 billion, the implication is that you were given a package to leave, right?
Maybe,
like
sure, maybe, yeah.
Well, I mean, that would be the implication.
But it's not like they announced this publicly. This is why he left, and he didn't have any accountability for that. He just left probably with the golden parachute and then has his own little media career now. But he was the only one. But there were like 6 other hosts. Pereiro, Sean Hannity, I don't remember. These kids have the wackiest fucking names. But there were so many of these hosts were implicated, and then there were a lot of the execs and senior execs that were implicated as well. Like when the misinformation is that pervasive on your network, it feels like half the network should go.
I guess to some point, I think I would be comfortable with certain chunks of Fox News being axed off or like completely removed, or hosts getting fired and replaced, because you can't really have proper dialogue with other people in a space that's like heavily filled with misinformation, which is why I feel so strongly about the Jimmy Kimmel example, because like if the FCC took the same opinion I did, which was that, hey, this kind of sounds like he's implying that the shooter was MAGA, and he's spreading this to his mass audience of like left-wingers, I think that's like harmful to the general discourse around it, because now you have people on Twitter, now you have people on Twitter going, oh, like Jimmy Kimmel said, like, you know, the right's trying to cover for one of their own. You know what I mean? It's like,
nobody was saying that on Twitter.
Well, I'm just, are we really?
Correct.
No one was saying that on Twitter. No one on the left was saying that.
No, it was the right saying that the left was saying that. Just like the one, who's the fucking white girl that they did the Nazi or whatever, with the jeans? Sydney Sweeney, yeah. Like when conservatives were saying that like Sydney Sweeney was being protested by all the liberal, nobody gave a fuck about that. No one on the liberal side cared about the Sydney Sweeney ads.
For the record, they did.
No.
I mean, you could look at okay, so this is an issue I have. So the way that you're separating out the like people on Twitter, and for the record, I've heard you say multiple times in different clips that Twitter is becoming more and more reality. Mm-hmm. And it's a little difficult for me to hear you try to separate yourself from Twitter all of a sudden during the middle of this conversation, when I've heard you drone on and on and on again about how the right and the Twitter connection is causing negative like backlash to a lot of the political spectrum. The same thing's happening on the left, and like it's a slower burn, obviously, because I think the left is a bit more tame than a lot of right-wingers. But it is important to note that like that is a serious issue, and that's right in front of us. And if you're going to sit here and like try to distance yourself from that, I feel like I don't know how those two things can exist at the same time.
Yeah, so very easily. When I say that Twitter is becoming more and more like reality, what I'm saying is that the stuff on Twitter is having a greater consequence in reality. But the reason why it's having a greater consequence in reality is because Republicans are showing people left-wing Twitter like that represents reality. So when somebody tweets something, now a Republican in real life is altering his vote based on what conservatives have shown him exists on Twitter.
Okay, but when Jimmy Kimmel spreads something that can be deemed misinformation, heavily considered it by like a left-wing audience, it becomes like very difficult to kind of like not say that being spread and rotated around. I understand what you're
saying, but it's like it's hard for me, even if I were to buy into your framing completely, our own administration lies about so much stuff. It's hard for me to take them seriously when it comes to deplatforming Jimmy Kimmel.
I mean, do you understand?
Jimmy Kimmel was not deplatformed for misinformation.
I know, because a lot of right-wingers were arguing more on the side of the fact that
they just don't like him.
They don't like him.
Yeah.
Trump had a thing out for him.
They don't like him. So the whole conversation, even I've kind of bought into the red herring. We've been having this conversation. He wasn't deplatformed for misinformation. He was deplatformed because Trump didn't like him.
I mean, you can argue that, right?
I think it's plainly obvious. Because if we were deplatforming for misinformation, there's a billion other people that would be deplatforming first.
I mean, you're someone that really likes direct statements, right? And you really like direct statements of someone saying X thing, and you kind of jump around to that to a lot of like defenses of your left-wing speeches and other things. But when you're doing that, like in hindsight, like when we're talking about like Republican speeches and Republican words, I find it like a little difficult to kind of believe that you can like run the same defense. You know
I absolutely could. So I don't like to do the individual statement thing. I like to look at things like holistically. I think that people that live in quotes, I think, are oftentimes liars. If you want to challenge holistically anything, so like earlier you made it sound as though I was saying Trump saying fight like hell was like the one line that I was using to attack him on that speech, when conservatives try to save it with the I know you'll go marching peacefully, although they misquote that as saying he told them to go marching peacefully. I pull that quote out because conservatives like to live in quotes, but that's a whole hour-long speech that he gives where he talks about how the election has been stolen. Mike Pence needs to help us steal it back. We're going to go and give all these congressmen the power and strength to steal it back.
Right.
We're going to go there and we're going to lose our country. Otherwise, here's more examples of all the voter fraud, half of which he'd already been told. Actually, I think every single example he'd already been told was untrue. Like, that was my issue with the speech. Now, generally, I can't get through all that with the conservatives because they don't even know that speech existed more than just one line.
But when you're harping on like specific words, and there's no specific words said by like we don't have like a written transcript of Donald Trump saying to the FCC, hey, listen, like, we have an opportunity here to get rid of Jimmy Kimmel.
They all are literally tweeting about it and talking about it openly.
Yeah, I know, but like, there's no like direct, like, you got what I'm saying? Like, there's
the FCC
no order
guy was
from the
literally
top
on a
down.
show, like talking about how, like, maybe we have to start looking at their licenses next. If they don't do something about this. And then Trump is truthing out, like, I support the removal of these guys. Like, how much more top down can it get?
I mean,
actually, here's a question. Can you think of a single thing in the entirety of the Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, or Joe Biden administration where a statement like that was made?
What? Like what?
That where the president of the United States is celebrating or advocating for the removal of like somebody on like a mainstream media network like that.
Not really.
Yeah, so it's unprecedented.
I mean, I'm not going to like disagree with the fact that it is unprecedented for Donald Trump to push for the removal of someone, right?
Okay.
If I'm going to like buy into the idea that it like is under his administration, right?
Well, no, wait. So I wouldn't make that argument normally because generally there's a level of separation between the president and his officers and his cabinet members and his different. However, this administration explicitly and specifically argues for the concept of like the unitary executive theory.
Yes.
Yeah. So that separation doesn't exist theoretically, and we know that it doesn't exist in practice because Donald Trump literally orders around his cabinet members and tells them what he wants them to do. Okay. So now he has a much bigger buy-in to what's going on with all of them. We see him truthing out the same. Trump has never... See, the frustrating thing, too, is that like when you're fighting a I'm not saying you're necessarily... I don't know if you're conservative, but when conservatives are fighting against Democrats, okay, and they're saying like, oh, well, we think that Biden directed Merrick Garland. And it's like, there's no evidence of this at all. And they're like, what about the one leak story where Biden said that he was mad or whatever? And it's like, okay, yeah, he's allowed to be mad, but he's not directing him. It's like, well, what if that was like an intentional story that was leaked in order to pressure Merrick Garland? Well, then that was the worst story ever because one, nothing bad happened to Merrick Garland, and two, Merrick Garland dragged his feet on fucking everything. Yeah. And the only thing that was fast out of that DOJ was like the special prosecutor against Biden that came out with the her. Right. No, that wasn't her. That was Durham, I think, right? Durham, yeah. Or the her was for the FBI thing. So if Biden was trying to do that, it was horrible. There's no evidence of him even really trying to do that. But then on the Trump side, we've got Trump openly bragging constantly about controlling his administration to do everything, and he's truthing out constantly. It's like a fucking stream of consciousness from this guy's brain, and we see and you're like, well.
I mean, it's just that like usually when it comes to democratic proceedings, right? I wouldn't expect the president to say, I'm going to war if I ran, and then the chief of like the Secretary of Defense replying underneath that thread going, yes, Mr. President. So I feel like relying off of Twitter and Truth Social.
Wait, well, I don't understand what the reference was.
But this is what I'm going to. Like the fact of like we're talking about the fact that like there's implication that like there's because he's like lampooning it all over fucking Twitter that his FCC leader, his executive of the FCC, is looking at that and going, yes, President Trump. I feel like we don't do that for most things in general. Like we don't look at like
we
Twitter
don't
comments
for most things
like
in general because
for like I'm just saying for like fine proof that like an order. Like I feel like you have to have the president sitting there on his desk going da 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 this executive order da 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 like I want this member of the head to do this and this and get rid of Jimmy Kimmel. Like I feel like you have to have
order
that
for all of that.
But then, like, I feel like we're just using Twitter, like, threads. Like,
we're using the speech of the president and then the actions of the people underneath him that are directly following the orders of his speech.
Okay. So to run this through, like, in a hypothetical, Donald Trump says, I'm declaring war on Iran tomorrow for whatever reason, right? Okay. And his chief of Secretary of Defense replies to that. Is that suddenly official?
Is it suddenly official, or would he suddenly do it?
Yeah, would he suddenly do it? And then would you then say that, like, well, Donald Trump told him to declare war based off of, like, a Twitter thread?
Maybe not. It's hard because like
But this is what I'm saying. Like,
no, stop. It's difficult because for the commander in chief, we already have like the authorized use of military force in the Middle East or whatever. So he kind of already has the authority to do that. Okay.
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
If there's like any other example, then it's different. I'm not saying that like these things are happening because he's truthing it. I'm just saying that as you see him truth it, you say everything. We can see where everything is coming from.
Yeah, I just find it like difficult to like fully like if there isn't like a concrete link there. There is obviously overlap, right? Between
Do you
what
think
the
that
FCC
Donald Trump talked to his FCC head about pressuring them to get rid of licenses or whatever to do something about Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert?
I don't have any proof that he did, which is what I'm highlighting.
Okay, but then in that case, then you can't have any beliefs about anything in office ever because you have no direct communication proof of every single conversation that's ever happened for any member.
You have plenty of transcripts from the president. Like we have the, oh God, what the hell are they called? The National Archives and Congress.
Yeah, but you don't have a record of every single thing.
Like almost everything. They literally take scraps, like Joe Biden's scraps of notes that he wrote down.
Yeah, but we don't have every
inside his car
between him.
Are in the like.
Yeah, we don't have every single communication between him and his inferior officers or his cabinet members for every single thing he's doing. We don't read all of those. We assume that like the government is operating in a certain way.
I guess this is a good time to segue into the Supreme Court ruling stuff because
sure. Well, here, just real quick, like Trump is truthing out to Bondi, like you need to go after these like political opponents, and now we have like crazy indictments on Comey. Do you think that Trump told Bondi, like in personal meetings, like, hey, you need to go after Comey?
I don't have any proof of that. Like, is
okay,
the thing.
You
like,
know
I
that
need
he
like
told
direct.
Comey.
I need transcripts, or I need like to
what
some
about,
degree like.
Okay, this is not a level of proof I think you would ever expect for anything else. But let's assume you do. Trump told Comey, you need to end the investigation into me, and then Comey didn't. He fired him.
Right.
You believe that happened, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've seen records of him engaging in what even Mueller said is probably obstruction of justice.
Yeah.
So obstructing an investigation. So why wouldn't we think that he's directing his attorney general to go after people when he's truthing out?
For the same reason, I wouldn't believe Mayor Garland was run by the Joe Biden administration to prosecute Trump.
But
because there's no direct proof. Like, I want direct proof. Like, I'm okay with agreeing if it did come out that he did pressure the FCC, and there's like transcripts of it, and he's saying, listen, I hate Jimmy Kimmel. I really want him off air. Here's what I need you to do. I need you to say that you're going to strike the license, and you're going to do this and this, and pressure them to get him off. If that was the case, then yeah, I'd be like, okay, the executive
The Merrick Garland stuff is not a direct comparison because, like, we can imagine.
Then why bring it up?
What?
Then why bring it up? You brought it up earlier as a direct comparison.
What was I comparing it to?
Like the situation about like.
Oh no, wait. I'm sorry. You're making the comparison, but I'm saying that the Merrick Garland thing wouldn't apply the same way here because we can imagine Merrick Garland taking the actions as the DOJ head that he is, that he needs to be taking these actions independent from Biden, because we've got plenty of statements from all the parties involved saying Biden and Garland don't directly communicate with each other because it's improper. Biden himself believes that. He said as much. Merrick Garland believes that. He said as much. All the stuff that he's investigating, one, there was a special counsel that was appointed for this, so it wasn't even directly Garland's decision. A lot of it was for Jack Smith, right? And so we have all of this. We have no reason to believe it. We've got plenty of information for people saying it wouldn't happen, and we can totally conceive of the scenario like, well, why would this happen? Well, of course, he did a lot of crazy criminal shit. Like, it makes sense why this investigation happened. Meanwhile, an FCC head has never, to my knowledge, in the history of the United States, come out and said things like, we need to pull the licensure from these comedians that the president hates with no connection to anything the president is telling me whatsoever. And Donald Trump directs all of his other officers openly. He says it on Truth constantly. That's a pretty easy thing to believe. Donald Trump hasn't come out and denied. Donald Trump hasn't come out and said, oh, no, I would never. Like, wouldn't you say that? Like, oh, I never talked to the FCC head about, like, threatening anybody or anything like that.
Yeah, but we know Donald Trump at this point just rolls with the punches at this point. Like, whatever is running headlines, whatever news, he doesn't really try to stake like a claim on anything because it kind of caters to
he'll
his
deny
base,
stuff
right?
if he thinks like he's denied the Epstein stuff a ton, right? He's not rolling with that.
Yeah.
So I feel like the circumstantial, I feel like there's a ton of like, it's pretty obvious that he's directing his people around. I don't think he said you need to threaten to pull the. He probably told. I don't even know if he would have talked to that. He probably talked to somebody and said we need whatever we can do to get these fuckers off the air or whatever. And then people bring him ideas like, what if we do this? We could threaten, and they're like, yeah, fuck it. If you do that, yeah, do it.
It's just like my issue is I can conceptualize a lot of worlds, right? In the same way where like Joe Biden, yes, has degrees of separation between his investigation, but very easily like degrees of separation can be used to like obfuscate the fact of like where the orders are actually coming down, which is from the executive branch, right? So, and you can argue that like, well, he ran his administration differently. It doesn't mean that it couldn't happen, right? And my issue is like, I just want evidence, right? That's what it kind of comes down to.
That standard of proof would never be achievable in any government because most of the time you're not going to have that direct communication. We can look at all the other actions. If Biden was controlling the DOJ, why was there a special prosecutor investigating his own document? We got more information about the Biden documents in his garage than we got about the Trump Mar-a-Lago stuff. Why would Biden preside over a special prosecutor that was investigating his son? Hunter Biden for how long? Like what? Like none of this makes sense if he's actually directing.
For the record, it's not like that I'm trying to stake a claim on whether or not Mayor Garland. I'm just highlighting the fact that like there is a lack of like evidence to confirm Republican beliefs on that. And when I'm a conservative, I look at it, I go, okay, I can't like get behind that in the same way I can't get behind the idea that the FCC chairman was like jumping in on this to fire because like I need like some proof.
Sure. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so then just curious, so just one tangential claim and we go to the next thing.
Okay.
You would never, ever make the claim ever that Biden was ever senile, right? Because we have no 100% confirmation or proof of any kind of senility. A bad debate performance is not evidence of being senile.
I mean, I would say he's old, and old people forget stuff. I mean, I got a grandmother.
We're not talking about being old, we're talking about being senile.
Well, okay. I would say that he probably wasn't senile. I mean, he was able to maintain himself on stage. I do think he was old and like unfit in a lot of ways because of his age. It makes it difficult.
What do you mean by unfit? Now we're playing weasel word games. Is Donald Trump unfit because of his age? Because I think he's the same age now, right?
To some degree, yeah. I mean, Donald Trump's getting up there. You can see he's kind of getting sleepy with the auto pen stuff, and it's difficult, right? Like, I mean,
you have the same standard for both? Okay. All right. Next, what was the next thing?
Okay, so this is kind of going to segue off of the Mayor Garland stuff. We can segue right into the Supreme Court ruling. Supreme Court ruling clearly says that the president has immunity to criminal prosecution, right? That's kind of the general gist. And then it also gave him some loosely granted powers to run the executive very strongly, right? That's kind of what the general gist of the ruling. We agree on that? Just making sure we're on the same.
I would specify that a lot, but we can run with that for now.
Yeah. I don't want to sit here and like
go into
the court briefs or kill me. So the reason why I'm harping on this is because I don't think the Supreme Court's ruling was unjustified, right? I think it was completely justified based off of like previous precedent that was set by previous presidents, right? So when we look at the conduct of, we can go all the way back to Andrew Jackson, right? This man single-handedly pulled out all the funding from every single bank in the national bank, split them up into pet banks. So he literally redistributed finances that were set for the government, redistributed them, wasn't impeached, wasn't charged for anything whatsoever. And now we have people like you complaining about the fact that...
just curious, for Andrew Jackson, what would the crime he have committed, Ben? Did he steal this money for himself personally?
Well, the big issue is that, one, Congress was not in session when he did this. So Congress couldn't even have an opinion on him.
What was the crime he committed?
Well, the crime for impeachment would have been the fact that, I guess you could argue embezzlement, you could argue a ton of things because
embezzlement, doesn't that mean you're personally stealing and mishandling the money? Like
yeah, because there's the pet banks that he put them in were well-known associates that were in his party and privileged and favored towards him. There's you could charge him of a bunch of things because it's insane. It's insane to be able to take all the money and purposely bankrupt the national bank without Congress's opinion.
But I don't know if it's a crime.
Yeah, but without Congress's approval, who is the coin purser, right?
Okay, why didn't Congress impeach him afterwards when they came back?
I think there wasn't enough seats that were against him to be able to properly follow through with the impeachment. They did publicly censure him, which is basically Congress's ability to condemn a sitting president. It's as close as you can get to an impeachment without being able to actually charge anyone. So it would be similar if the Democrats got together and said, we really disagreed that Donald Trump, the woman he assaulted, right, and lost a civil case to. They could publicly censor him about that and be like, this is really bad. It's a strong disapproval. But there's an example like that, and people complain about the way Trump's handling the money structure, right? With the way he's just letting funds drive in certain things. This has been well established as something that the president can do.
Well, to be clear, that's not why he was being criminally charged. He's being criminally charged for intentionally mishandling classified material, and then he was being criminally charged for an obstruction of our rights related to the trying to coup the government, basically.
Yeah, I'm just setting up previous situations where the president was not charged basically for being able to conduct duties under the executive branch, right? Because the Treasury is under his executive branch.
So one, I don't know enough details about the Andrew Jackson thing to fucking say. So I have a feeling if I were to look into that, I feel like I would probably come away with a different understanding than how you're describing it. Number one. Number two, it doesn't sound like you've clearly enunciated crimes that he's committed, because criminal stuff is different than doing improper stuff procedurally. And then three, I mean, a more recent example I would say is, why did Ford pardon Nixon if the understanding was that Nixon could never be charged with a crime?
It's a really good question. Do you think a pardon is an admission of guilt?
Yes, I think it's how it's considered, yeah.
How do you feel about Biden pardoning his cabinet and his members in his house? Do you think that's an admission of guilt? Because you just said that a pardon is an admission of guilt.
That's generally how it's written. Formally, that is how it's taken.
So do you think Biden's office committed crimes then?
I think they would have been charged with crimes.
Oh, no. You just said that a pardon is an admission of guilt, which is why it matters in the Ford case, Ford pardoning Nixon, because the reason why it shows that the president can be charged is because of the fact that the president is not immune technically, because why else would Ford cover for Nixon?
Yep.
In the same way, if a pardon is that heavily weighed and that implicit of a sentencing of guilt, how on earth could you argue the same case isn't for Biden pardoning his cabinet?
You're transposing the argument into something different. The question right now is whether or not somebody can be criminally charged for a thing. It seems like the understanding was Nixon could be criminally charged.
But where is that coming from?
Because that's what every reasonable person would assume. Nobody would assume the president of the United States is beyond criminal charges. Everybody would assume that.
When I'm looking at the Andrew Jackson situation,
so far back.
But for the record, I can continue through. So we can look at the Trail of Tears that he did. Then we can move forward in history.
Were these crimes?
Well, yeah. I would consider the forcible relocation of the Native Americans and attempted genocide of them to be a crime, especially since
this is going to sound cold, but I guess in front of my audience. But a genocide is not a crime. You can't be charged in the United States for that as a crime if your function as commander-in-chief or whatever, right? If that's what you're doing.
If you want to argue that they were citizens of the United States, which they were since we, annexed their land, right? They were citizens of the United States. Forcibly relocating your own citizens is definitely against the Quartering Act, number one, if we want to go through the Constitution. But you could go bit by bit, ripping apart the way it's not even equal treatment, right? All those other things. And then to go further in history, we look at FDR and the internment camps, which are concentration camps for the record, completely not charged for literally stripping U.S. citizens of their own rights. He was not impeached for violating their freedom of speech, for violating their right to autonomy, for violating, they're literally being quartered by soldiers in their own home. They're breaking most literally breaking multiple constitutional
Sure.
amendments.
So no, they're not. Okay. So for the internment camp stuff, that was literally, I'm pretty sure, law passed by Congress granting the power to the
It was not a law passed by Congress.
Wasn't that from the enemy?
Nope. It was an
Alien Enemies
executive
Act?
order. It was an executive order
I'm sure
that
he
came
did
top down.
the executive order, like ordering it, but the authority to do that, for sure, came from the
Nope.
Alien Enemies Act.
It might have come from the Alien Enemies Act, but the main point is that it was an executive order used.
An executive order is just the president saying they're going to do a thing. He can't create new laws. Well, until Trump, you can't create new laws with an executive order. It's just like a direction for your branch.
To some degree,
the power that he was drawing from came from the Alien Enemies Act. That's where he got the authority to do that.
To some degree, you can create new laws with
No.
for the record, Andrew Jackson wrote an executive order to separate the funds from the banks.
I don't know. If
Okay,
this was
I won't
Andrew
harp on
Jackson
it.
hour
Okay,
from
okay,
5,000 years ago, I can't. Yeah.
For the record,
That-
I'm just highlighting like a trail, throughout
Yeah,
US history of
but
the.
now I know that you just brought up the internment camp stuff completely incorrectly because there is a specific law passed by Congress to allow him to do that. So I don't know if the Andrew Jackson stuff
Okay,
is
for the
being-
record, the Alien Enemies Act doesn't say you can intern hundreds of thousands of Japanese citizens. It doesn't say you
the
can
Alien
intern
Enemies
hundreds of
Act,
thousands of people.
This granted wide powers to the president because the whole. Keep in mind these emergency powers. There was another emergency powers act, but the idea was like we're being invaded by another country, and as a part of that either invasion or we're actively at war with them, the president has like huge authority to do. That's why they invoked it for the Venezuelan stuff, and they use it to deport Venezuelans with a totally different structure of due process.
Yeah, but
or lack
putting
of.
people in concentration camps is very different than just using the Alien Enemies Act to deport people, right? Like it's your own U.S. citizens, and like it's an executive order too. That's the other
It's
important
not just
thing.
an
here.
executive, it was an act from Congress. I encourage you to.
For the
look into
record, the Alien Enemies Act was used to help bolster the executive order, right? It was the thing that was used as a permission to. But the executive, it's not like the Alien Enemies Act says, well, we can put a bunch of people in concentration camps. It doesn't say that.
I think it gives the president the ability for people from enemy countries, nationalities, or I don't know if it included ethnicity or not, but nationalities were allowed to, like, without like due process, to be like detained in like times of war and stuff. That was a huge power that was granted via that. Because it was supposed to be the idea was like, let's say Mexico invades us, right now. Like, does the president have the ability to say, okay, well, hold on, if you're Mexican, like, you got to chill or whatever, right? It's kind of shitty, but I mean, like, that would be an emergency power granted to the president if you are of that nationality. But I'm just saying that, like, these were founded in law, whether we think it's extreme or not. Why did Nixon accept the pardon from Ford unless he thought he could be charged with a crime? Because he thought he could be charged with a crime. When you talk about like Biden being pardoned, his son, or you talk about like the J6 committee being pardoned, they accepted those pardons because they thought they were going to be charged with crimes from the Republicans.
Okay, but the main reason why Ford pardoning Nixon matters, right, is because it implies that the president can be criminally charged, correct?
Yes.
Okay. If that is the case, right, and you said it was an admission of guilt, right?
I'm saying that people see pardons, that's a separate thing, but people generally see pardons as an admission of guilt, sure.
Okay, but if you're not arguing that it's an admission of guilt, then like the pardon was basically meaningless.
No,
right? Like
the important thing about the pardon is that you can't be charged with that crime because you're pardoned from it. You double jeopardy, right? You can't.
Right.
Yeah.
So wait, what I'm saying is like the pardon itself, right?
Yes.
When the president issues it, right, and it prevents that person from being charged from that crime.
Correct.
Right. That's like the implication, right? So when it comes to like Ford pardoning Nixon, right? And that was in reference to Watergate, right? I don't see how like anyone can issue pardons for anything, right? Like it doesn't mean that the person actually committed the crime, right? So like if they didn't actually commit the crime, then like a pardon is just a meaningless piece of paper. Like the president could pardon anyone, right? And like it doesn't actually have like
I think it's a wide thing. Yeah, the president.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. So like how can you imply that like the president could be charged based off the pardon if there isn't actually any like merit to like what a pardon means?
Well, what a pardon, you keep going to this, like, does it mean you're guilty or innocent or whatever? The pardon means that the federal government can't charge you with that crime.
Yeah, but then the reason why I'm bringing up the Biden situation is why would Biden pardon his family members if he wasn't worried that they could be charged with crimes?
Because he was worried they were going to be charged with crimes.
Okay, so in the Nixon's case, he got pardoned because he was worried he could be charged with crimes.
Yes.
Right, but that doesn't mean he would actually be like capable of committing those. Like it doesn't mean that they actually are like real, right? That's what we're acknowledging.
I'm just saying that he was acting, and everybody in the country was under the assumption, and all of our investigative bodies were under the assumption that the president could be charged with crimes, and everybody was acting in that way. Like that was the assumption. Like of course the president could be charged with crimes.
Okay, but like I'm looking at all these examples throughout history where the
And
president
Andrew
was
Jackson.
not charged. But not just Andrew Jackson. I'm just saying like with FDR and stuff. Like these were cases that were brought before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that it is okay basically for the president to...
Yeah, but when the Supreme Court is bringing these cases, what they're challenging is, my guess is, I don't know the particular case, but my guess is the challenge for these cases was if the executive has the power to perform these acts, not trying to hold him personally criminally liable for them.
Okay. I get where you're... Okay.
And Trump's stuff wasn't like this would be a totally different conversation if we were talking about Trump committed some act as president doing a thing or whatever. He was doing things for his personal beneficial gain. That was the issue. They were crimes that he was personally committing for his own personal enrichment, not like actions as his role as president, like he tries to say, or like the Supreme Court tried to say.
Okay. And when you're talking about those actions, right? So the whole argument for immunity stemmed from the idea that like whatever the president does under the executive branch, right, is something that basically can't be charged.
Kind of, yeah.
Criminally. That's that's the conclusion they came to, right?
Oh,
and that's like something that has been upheld in court after court after court, right? Like the
Well, what do you
president...
mean? We just got this like 3 or 4, like 3 years. Was this 2022 or 2023?
2023.
Yeah, so what do you mean? It's been upheld time. It's like a brand
I mean,
new
I'm just saying,
ruling.
like, historically, like, throughout the history of president, like, the president has acted in time and time again in ways that have broken or bended the laws of Congress and not been charged, basically, with those crimes, right? And like,
where he's personally done a criminal act that he could be charged with a crime with, I just don't think so.
I mean, do you not think that, like, the actions taken... And by the way, later on, the Supreme Court ruled that what FDR did was wrong.
Sure.
Right? So...
But even if he was wrong, that doesn't mean he's criminally liable.
Okay. So you don't think the president would be criminally liable for putting through an unconstitutional executive order that puts people in concentration camps?
No.
Why not? You don't? So just to get this cleared up, if the president put through an executive order, like Donald Trump just decides to drone strike Joe Biden for whatever reason, if he puts through that executive order, he can't be criminally held responsible for that, right?
Well, according to the current Supreme Court, he can't be.
Oh, that's what I'm saying, yeah.
But I think he should be, because I would argue in that role, unless he had intelligence or something saying otherwise, right? It seems like he's just like paying somebody, or he's carrying out like a hit. He's murdering somebody.
Yeah.
Now, for instance, if it was the case privately that we find out, that for JFK and the internment camps or whatever, where he, he's like, oh, there's like these 300 Asian guys that I fucking hate, and I'm gonna do this like internment camp thing because I hate these motherfuckers because they beat me in Pi
So there
or
has
whatever.
to be like some level of intent to it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Or?
Well, intention is a huge. It's half the criminal thing, right? The actus reus and the mens rea, right?
Well, if Trump just goes through and does something that can't be deemed as intention, because you can't necessarily be in the president's head at all times.
No, we are absolutely in people's heads. That's how we charge every crime.
Okay. But that's what I'm saying. Like, it comes down to intention, right? And we know the intention of like certain people like FDR and other people were to like respond negatively to these groups of people. Like,
for what reason though? Personally, or because they thought it was in the best interest of the country? Because you would have to make an argument that he's like personally trying to kidnap and detain people because he personally hates them or whatever, right? But he's clearly acting in his role as president. Then seems really hard. I don't know what crime you would charge him with. But for Donald Trump, it's very obvious that he wasn't acting in any of his roles as president. Half the fucking shit that was happening was his own personal goonies. Fucking Giuliani, Sidney Powell, these weren't even members of the White House or anything, right? He's very clearly not acting in his capacity as president. And all of the orders that he's issuing, he's telling people to lie and stuff for his own personal gain. These aren't presidential actions that he's doing maybe improperly. These are criminal acts that he's doing personally for personal gain. Yeah,
but I'm just saying, like, these things have been like ruled in like future rulings to be like criminal, basically. And like nothing comes...
They're not ruled criminal. If a thing is made illegal, you can't do a thing. That doesn't make it criminal. A criminal thing is like there are criminal statutes made up. Criminal statutes mean that you can be charged with a crime where you kind of a deprivation of rights and everything. They're not procedural civil things where people can just be sued for money or you did an improper act or you're censured or whatever. But like...
I guess I'm just like highlighting the fact that like the president has gone about multiple things in like kind of unconstitutional ways or ways that the Supreme Court has deemed
Sure, but unconstitutional doesn't mean criminal.
Well, what I'm highlighting here is like the president goes about unconstitutional things, and a lot of the things that happened during the J6 stuff, you would argue are unconstitutional, right? Like the whole ignoring of the Electoral Count Act, right? Like these are things that violate...
I wouldn't say that was unconstitutional. I would say he was breaking the law.
Why would he be breaking the law?
Because he was criminally breaking... Well, because the ECA was a law, and he was telling people to break it.
Okay.
So that's conspiracy, to break the law. So actually breaking... Well, they didn't actually, I guess, because Pence didn't, but...
Okay, but so I know the big issue with the break of the Electoral Count Act is the fact that the votes were divvied up to Mike Pence at the end, and he was supposed to like throw them out or send it back to the House, right? That's the general gist of
kind of. It's just how you count the electoral votes, yeah.
Yeah. So if that's kind of the case, right? Why did Democrats go and push through legislation to basically, like, if it was something illegal, why did they put in legislation to make it illegal after it happened?
I don't know. Stupid. They shouldn't have, because these stupid arguments are used. Because Donald Trump knew he was breaking the law. It's in every single email that Eastman and Chesbrough are sending out. They know that they're breaking the law. Every time you hear a conservative,
I know, but like if the Democrats push through legislation like this, it clearly shows that even in their estimates, like he wasn't breaking the law. It was an ambiguous law, right? With like the way
it wasn't ambiguous. That's why they knew they were breaking it.
Yeah, but I'm saying you can say that, but like, why did Democrats then go through?
Because they wanted to tighten up the language a little bit. But they didn't need to. But they thought they could. But I mean,
so we just think like the entire Democratic House and Senate just thought they needed to tighten up language on a bill.
Yeah, there was
a virtue
signal.
Like you get an entire like mass of Democratic. Like I just find it hard to believe. Like you get a whole mass.
You can find that hard to believe, but like Donald Trump and all of his people, all of them said they were going to be breaking the law. They all acknowledged they were going to be breaking the law. Pence was under the impression they were breaking the law. That's why he said no. Barr quit over Trump asking to break. Every single person in their circle all acknowledged that they would be departing from the ECA, and their claim was that it was unconstitutional, which is the code word for them for breaking the law. All of them said that's what they were going to do, and they very clearly, like, I know the Democrats appended like 2 sentences or whatever stupid shit because they thought it made it more rock solid, but like he would break it the same way as it is now. He would have done the same thing. Like he was clearly, you acknowledge that they said that we are going to break the law because we think it's unconstitutional.
I mean, he may have said that multiple times.
Okay, so then they thought he was breaking the law, right?
So, but if you think you're breaking the law, like, does that magically make it that there's a law in place that you're breaking?
Yes. Well, like, for instance, if an FBI officer tells me that he's selling me some weed, and I go, oh, yeah, I want to buy that weed, but it's not real weed, I'm still breaking the law because I'm trying to buy illicit drugs. I'm trying to buy narcotics.
Okay, I get what you're saying there, but you understand what I'm saying. Like, if you think that, like, freedom of speech is breaking the law for whatever reason in your head, and then you go and you commit an act, right, that violates that law, that freedom of speech doesn't exist. Then,
you're saying if he thinks he's breaking the law, but they're not actually breaking the law?
Yeah.
Then theoretically, I mean, if it was adjudicated as such, then you could say, then fine, that he wasn't breaking the law. But even his own people, what was the name of the guy? It wasn't Chesbrough. It was the guy who literally said that if we went to the Supreme Court, I think Rosen was arguing this guy. If you went to the Supreme Court, you know that you would lose on this. I think it might have been Eastman. And initially Eastman was like, well, yeah, we'd probably lose like 2-7. And then he was like, oh yeah, we'd probably lose 9-0. But the idea is that once Trump was in office, there's no way the Supreme Court is going to unseat the president because he said that they would kick it back because of the political questions and the major questions doctrine. So that's like a whole ass scheme to break a law. No, the Supreme Court won't probably overturn it because it's too big of a question. And then to carry on like ordinary business, like, it doesn't get much more clear from that, I think, from start to finish of what the goal was. And it would have, if you read the ECA, like they clearly wanted to depart from what the ECA says.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts, Tristan?
I guess, like, can I briefly touch on manufacturing?
Yeah.
Okay, do you want to?
Sure.
Okay. I kind of.
Well, do you find it troubling that the president of the United States could now order a hit on a U.S. citizen and the Supreme Court has said that he could never be charged with a crime for that?
I mean, that kind of happened with Obama, right? With the wedding and the drone strike.
So, but the difference was that one, that person was working with a foreign terrorist organization, right? FTO had the designation, number one. And number two, Obama was worried about breaking the law. So Obama literally went to his DOJ, the Office of Legal Counsel, and they had like a memo written up for whether or not they thought this was in the authority of the president to do or not to do. And like he consulted his like legal professionals that were provided to him in the White House, and then they did the strike, right?
Well, okay, to preface that, it is very important to note that the AUMF gives broad designation for what the president can designate as a terrorist organization and what it can respond with the military. The president's always had the capability, technically, to assassinate anyone in the country by designating them as terrorists because of the broad designation and the fact that it gives the president complete total control to deploy as many troops as he wants, wherever he wants. That's why we had troops in, like, I believe it was like all over the place in the Middle East that Congress wasn't even aware of. And like
for the authorization of use of middle.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, and it applies here, even in state, right? Like the president's had that power before Congress.
I understand, and theoretically, like I agree with that. I think we probably, to some extent, like the president needs broad executive power to do that. But I'm saying that like right now, the Supreme Court has said that Donald Trump could personally just order an assassination on a guy that he doesn't like.
So I'm saying that was already the case.
It wasn't the case.
That was the case. On
nobody. Then why did Obama go to the OLC, and was it Holder that wrote the memo? Why did he literally ask them for an analysis on whether or not he thought he had the justification to do the strike or not?
Because by the end of the day, determined that he did have the justification to do the strike, which is what I'm highlighting. You have the justification as a president. If you deem someone a terrorist threat under the AUMF,
yes,
you can look at the wording specifically. So if Donald Trump or Joe Biden had designated like MAGA as a terroristic threat, he could technically deploy troops without Congress's permission and circumvent the legal system and kill
whoever. It wouldn't be circumventing, but we would have to know that he's doing it for that purpose and not just because he personally hates somebody.
I mean, he just has to designate Joe Biden like publicly as a like it's that easy. The AUMF's like it gives
So
very
you,
broad
you
justification.
think you think that if the president right now were to designate, if he were to say, "Oh, I'm designating every single Democrat in Congress as a terrorist and kill them all," prior to this stupid immunity ruling, you think everybody in the U.S. would be like, "Oh yeah, he has the legal authority to do that"?
I mean, technically, yeah. The AUMF gives that broad of a jurisdiction. You
Okay.
can look at it. It's I mean, it's a very it was a very questionable.
I haven't read the text, but I'll bet you $20 right now that if I were to go and read that law, it has some type of characteristics for how you would define a foreign. It doesn't say anybody you want, LeMayo. It probably uses words like, who the president is deemed a threat to the interests of the United States, or who the whatever intelligence services have delivered like represents like a reasonable threat to whatever bullshit.
Yeah, it does have wording like that, but the problem is it's so broad that you can technically
That's
rope
in TV
anyone.
shows. When people say the wording is broad, that's a TV show term. It's broad. Usually, when stuff seems broad, usually the legal terminology is used exists in like other bills or other statutes, or there's a common legal understanding for how it's used, and it's not just like used to randomly kill or do anything. Like that's not typically how it works. Like.
I mean, it was how we had so many troops like deployed in places that Congress was aware of. Like, it lets you circumvent like the ability to appeal to like. It's like you're saying like, oh, well, you could just like appeal to actually.
But it doesn't limit the ability to do that because
that's what I'm saying. It's so open-ended, like the way it's worded.
Congress totally has oversight. You know how I know this? Because what are you talking about?
They didn't have oversight. You
what
can
is,
look
what,
at
what
you
is
can
the
look at the
authorization?
findings.
What is the authorization for the use of military force? It's a bill from Congress.
Yeah, they gave the president the ability.
So they can take it away. They could pass more legislation to amend it.
And they probably should. But I'm saying.
Sure, but I'm just saying it's weird to say that the
what does that have to do with anything?
It's weird to say the Congress has oversight or can't change this when the Congress could literally just change that bill if they wanted to, right?
When I say oversight, I'm referring to the fact that we had troops deployed in places that Congress was not aware of. They had to do a hearing on it when they found out this, and the hearing determined, oh, we have all these troops all over in all these different countries running different missions, and we have no fucking idea about it, and this is just the way the AUMF works. Like, it's very broad. The president has always had the ability to do it. And just because it's like...
I'm just saying they can change the law if they want, number one. Number two...
But I'm just, like, your question was that, like, to re-round it back, to reset it, because we'll go off on ADHD rants. The question mainly was, like, doesn't it scare me that the president has the ability to, like, murder someone of impartiality?
Sure.
Right?
And you're saying that they have broad use under this law because of the language. And I'm saying that, like,
that's
my
what I'm saying.
guess
The president's always had the capability to do that.
Yeah, but the president's never used it to just, like, kill random U.S. citizens in the United States, except for...
Okay, but, like, just
9/11.
because, like, someone doesn't use something doesn't mean they don't have the capability under the like jurisdiction to do something.
Well, I mean, that's one of the legal things. That's kind of one of the things that we look at to see like what a common understanding. Like if you're going back and you're doing an analysis of some original law, you look and see how people acted around it at the time. It's like, what do we think people's understanding of it was?
Yeah.
Right. So, and if the understanding, like if you start doing a whole bunch of new shit with the law that no one's ever seen before, people are probably going to challenge on like, was this like the intention of the law? And then you have like a whole Supreme Court battle over it. But so I guess like broadly, hold on, I'm sorry, before the manufacturing, so are you okay, you think the President of the United States can never commit a crime while he's President of the United States? You think that's a good reading, a fair reading, what the framers would have wanted, it's a fair way to evaluate the President?
You get into like tougher territories there because here's the problem. So number one, the framers intended that, and this is the way it was passed originally, the opposing party's leader would always be the vice president. That was overturned in the 12th Amendment. So originally the framers, in a situation where let's say this whole thing just happened January 6th and the voter thing, the president technically should have the opposing party as his VP, meaning that this wouldn't ever be like a conflict of interest. Now, of course, this was overturned, right, eventually, so now it became a major problem, right, because now you could have the same VP and the same party running. So when you have a situation like that, it becomes very clear to me that like the framers did intend this. It's just that we removed the check and balance on the fact that it would be a different opposing party that would always be the VP. And when you remove
why would that even matter to them? It's like the VP can overrule the president on like an assassination or something, no?
Well, I'm talking about in reference to like the
president being charged with a crime.
Yes, in charge of a crime when it comes to like the committees and stuff, right? So like when it comes to the Electoral Count Act, right? We're talking about the president breaking a law there. Right, that you say it's a law, but it was originally intended for the framers to be like the president was allowed to have these types of things, right? And like we whittle away at certain areas that create new issues of criminality that weren't determined to be criminal by the framers, is what I'm saying.
So the framers would have said the president of the United States could mug a man outside and he would be beyond criminal charges.
I mean, to some degree, yeah. I mean, just when you have to look at their rulings, right? When you have to look at their rulings and the way that they treated previous presidents, administrations, and what they did.
By the drafting the Constitution, when we just had a rebellion against a king,
yes,
and we're trying to create a federal government, And
Yes.
part of the creation of that federal government is a heavy restraint on the federal government's ability to do stuff because the states were all worried about a stronger federal government emerging that would be tyrannical, that they would have, and they have one strong, fiery executive who is elected by the people and not the
Yeah.
Congress, that they would have thought that that man could be beyond criminal prosecution.
I mean, there's impeachment for that, right? That would be
No,
that would be the
impeachment is
argument. There
very
would be
different.
impeachment.
Impeachment is very different.
Now-
And impeachment exists explicitly not for that.
Well, impeachment exists for the removal of the president when he's basically derelict of duty, right?
Sure,
He's not
yeah,
following
not
through
for
on
crime,
Congress's
though, not for
orders.
crimes.
I know, but there's some more you're like arguing in such a gray area, right? Because
Well,
like
it's
technically
not, but
breaking
no,
the
to be
Constitution
clear,
isn't outright a
before
law.
Trump, this wasn't a gray area to anybody. And even for you, I don't know how old you are, but like prior to Trump, if I would have asked you, do you think the president should be able to like commit a crime and get away with it and no criminal? You would immediately say, well, obviously not. Of course, that's really stupid. He would be the only person in the entire United States that has that kind of that immunity. Nobody has immunity from criminal prosecution. It's not a real thing, except for diplomats, I think, sometimes.
Well, I mean, the issue
foreign
there is when we're like arguing back and forth about this, right? If I did sit down and do the research, I would come to like a similar conclusion, even about Trump's existence. That I mean, it looks historically like the president gets away with a lot of bullshit, and you can argue like, oh, well, it's not criminally charged. He never really got criminally charged. Well, I think it's horrendous, like morally, to like intern a bunch of people in concentration camps and like hold guns to their head and say, like, if you leave, we're going to shoot you.
It's
Like,
horrendous morally to cheat on your partner, but that doesn't make it a crime. It doesn't mean it's a criminally prosecutable thing.
yeah, but this is like the weird area that like I'm.
It's not a
like,
weird area. We're in a very specific area. Can you be charged with a crime if you're the president? I feel like the answer is obviously yes. Everybody's always operated that way, and we would always have that assumption. I would feel really weird. Like, I could be wrong, but in the, is it called a monarchical, is it a monarchical republic where you have like the parliament?
Like an aristocracy and
You have
like
the parliament and you have the king still, and the
Yep.
king like does the laws and everything. I could be wrong, but I think even in that time, I think the king could be charged with a crime. Like, I don't think the king was above criminal prosecution there. I could be wrong on that, but I think that even the king could be charged with crimes at the time America was founded and everything.
Yeah, but I think the issue is more during that time, the king's more of like a figurehead. Like he's lost a lot of power to some degree. It depends on which governments
time
you're
of the
talking
Revolution
about.
in the United States?
Well, okay, it depends on which governments we're talking about, and like we could really get nitty-gritty there, but let's not do that.
Okay. All right. Okay. I think it's crazy the idea that the United States of America that had a revolutionary war against a king that we thought wasn't giving us good representation, that we have now granted the ability for the president of the United States to commit crimes to personally benefit himself, and we have somehow come to this understanding that he should be immune from all criminal prosecution. Before Trump, I don't think anybody in the country would have ever signed off on that. But post-Trump, because of partisanship, I think some people have.
I mean, every single time we've proven that he can be civilly charged, right? So, like, there's plenty of cases of presidents being civilly charged. So FDR got civilly charged for the internment camps. He had to pay out reparations to the U.S. government. There's plenty of examples of, like, civil
Wait a second.
charges.
Is that true?
Yeah, we gave $20,000 to every single surviving.
Hold on. We or JFK personally?
Well, the U.S. government.
Yeah, that's
right,
a
which
way
is under
different
his
thing because
administration.
presidents can't be held civilly liable. That was the whole point of the Nixon v. Fitzgerald case that Roberts so ignorantly relied on because that had to do with civil matters and not criminal matters. But that case said that you can't sue the president because you lose your job. I think it was an FAA person or whatever.
Well, yeah, in that type of situation, I'm talking about like civilly sued from like while you're in office, right? Like Donald Trump got civilly sued for his rape case on office, right? That happened, right? Like while he was in office, from my understanding, or at least the investigation.
Yeah, you can't sue the president while he's like in his role as president, which makes sense. Like if the president does fires a bunch of people from government, you can't sue him for you losing your job.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. But yeah, the
I guess
criminal
like
stuff is crazy.
The big issue I'm kind of pushing towards is like just historically, it looks like the president gets away with a lot.
Not crimes.
Yeah, I know, but like when you're breaking the Constitution and we're saying
That's not
it's
a crime.
I know, but it's not like a chargeable quote unquote offense.
That's
But
what we're
when,
talking about. That's important.
It's just it's a little difficult when like morally reprehensible things are being done but aren't quote unquote
But there's
considered
different
crimes,
procedures for addressing
right?
those things. If we think that there's a thing that we want to be stronger in the Constitution, or whatever, we can pass different legislation, or we can change it, we can amend the Constitution to change a thing. And so for criminal laws, we've got things that we as the public have decided these are crimes. We have an interest in citizens not committing them. But now we're saying the president is beyond that.
But that's what I'm saying. So like if we're due like account in Congress having the right and responsibility to patch in these gaps, that's what the Democrats did after January 6th, right? They patched in the gap. That was an issue there. And like what are we I know it's tough to kind of budge on, but like they did indeed like concede to some degree.
That doesn't mean
like,
they
it was
doesn't
legal.
mean they conceded. They tried. All of Trump's people acknowledged that it was illegal.
Well, I'm
We
just saying,
we
like,
should
Bush,
try
right,
to
sorry.
touch on manufacturing a little bit
Okay. Yeah,
before
go
we
ahead.
move on to our
Manufacturing,
next.
Manufacturing.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I just to clarify, I'm not trying to come off as bad faith. I hope I'm not. I'm trying to get like really into the nitty gritty details because that's how I prefer to like run conversations, debates. I hope you don't think I'm coming off as bad faith.
No, I don't necessarily do. I just think if you want to get into the nitty gritty detail, we're doing the immunity thing. You know, the immunity rule is just crazy.
Yeah,
like
okay,
nobody. I don't. Yeah. Okay. Manufacturing.
It has its issues. I won't disagree with that. So manufacturing, I think it's really important to return manufacturing to the United States of America.
When you say return manufacturing, you're
In
saying
its
that
full capacity. I'm talking World War II.
okay, well, because we manufacture more than we have in all the history of the United States, so we want even more manufacturing in the U.S. When you say bring
Yes.
it back, you mean
I'm
bring
talking
back
about-
like base manufacturing or whatever?
Yeah, I mean like returning our factories back to the United States of America. So, for example, I would like to highlight in particular the troublesome areas for me personally are the pharmaceuticals that are mass manufactured over in China. We had who knows how many countless of people die because they couldn't basically acquire N95 masks. We couldn't acquire ventilators because a lot of that stuff is manufactured and produced in China, and they are going to pressure and prefer their own country over the United States of America. And who knows how many countless people died because of that. That is not good, and that's because of the liberal global like trade system that we have set up where like everyone's supposed to quote unquote benefit from each other, but that's not really how it works because when pandemics happen, when wars happen, people clamp down on resources. We had this with Russia and Europe. There's this whole issue where Russia is like literally like Europe doesn't want to jump into anything with supplying Ukraine weapons because of the whole Russian like gas line, right, and all these other issues, right? So the reason I'm bringing this up in manufacturing is like returning manufacturing to the United States, which Trump is doing through the tariffs, ultimately secures more protection around our pharmaceutical industry, around things that we need when things go to shit. Here's the
Okay,
reason.
Can I ask a couple of basic questions? Do you think that if we bring when I say when I talk about productivity
Yes.
as a term in economics, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Familiar.
If we do you think it would be good if I said for us to bring back manufacturing jobs, we would necessarily be bleeding off higher productivity jobs to other countries in the world in favor of lower productivity jobs in the United States of America? Do you think that would be a worthy trade?
Yes and no, because an important thing to note is the fact that if we do bring back manufacturing factories here, the majority of it's going to be automated, right? Like we can't deny that. And with automation coming through, when you bring back a lot of our manufacturing hubs here, we can produce a lot of things for dirt cheap rates that compete with Chinese slave labor, right? Like compete with these like pennies that people are making for like Temu and other
hold
things.
on. So, then the second thing is, so we can't compete, right? Because if we were, we would already be doing it. We wouldn't need exorbitant tariffs to do it, right?
Well, I mean, here's the problem. You can't deny that, well, you've said this many times, I agree with you to some degree. The U.S. has greatly benefited from the current global trade economy, right?
Yeah.
Like we gain a lot of surplus in our economy. We have very strong value in our currency. The problem is we're so intertwined with all these other countries that when we do start pulling ourselves away over concerns of manufacturing like pharmaceuticals, which I think you would agree with me, it's probably not good that if we have a pandemic in the United States that China can just clamp down on their pharmaceutical product, either to A, screw us over because they can, or B, if they don't have any malicious intent for their own people. That is a very dangerous situation to present, and when we're so entwined with China, it becomes very difficult because I don't see a way we can really distance ourselves from them because everyone has their own business interests, right? You talk about this a lot.
Sure. So I'm curious, are you American or Canadian?
American.
Okay. I only asked this because I only learned this, I think, like a year or two ago. I didn't know this.
Yeah.
In Canada, how many Canadians in the house tonight? Oh, my God. Okay, damn. It's not that far away. Jesus. So in Canada,
I love our Canadians, for the record. I love them.
the provinces can set a lot of their own trade, like interstate, inside the country. Like
We do some of that here, too.
No, we absolutely don't.
Not at all. We don't have any ability for states to conduct interstate commerce.
No, they have to. Everything has to be reciprocated. Like a state couldn't make its own currency. I don't think that.
Okay.
Like
I'm talking
a state,
about
like California couldn't say
my
we're
bad.
not selling.
I misunderstood what you're talking about.
Okay, sure.
Trade
They
there.
can't like
your currencies. Yeah. No, that's a
well, not just currency, but like I don't think California can say we don't ship to Arkansas or we have preferential trade deals with New York.
Yes. No, that was established. But like I thought you meant trade in general. I was like, no, they can like trade between states like that.
Oh, they can trade, yeah.
Yeah,
But I think in Canada, like I think like a province could say, we're going to have a different trade relationship with Alberta than we have with Calgary or Newfoundland or whatever these fake fucking places are, right?
Yes.
Right. They have the ability to do that. Do you think in the United States, do you think that we should allow the states to be able to conduct their own trade relationships with each other? Like, should California be able to give preferential trade to New York and bar like Louisiana, Georgia, Alabama if they wanted to?
You get into really dangerous territory with like laws like that when it comes to like preferential treatment between states, because then you could have purposely like beneficial states. Let's say New York, or for whatever reason, West Virginia. It's never going to happen, but let's say they have an economic boom and they like start seceding ahead, and then other states around them, because they don't want people to leave from their state to contribute to the economy or any numerous reasons, they could very easily gang up and like cripple that state by not like supplying it of certain things. So that would be a very big issue. So I kind of agree with that, like them having full freedom like that.
Sure. Okay. So walk me through this, because I would agree with exactly what you would say, but then I would just extend that one level, and I would say I feel like countries all being self-interested in a really hardcore way would be really negative, because now if anything hits, all of these guys could be working together and going to try to fuck over the United States. They're not going to send us their best and brightest students, their best and brightest engineers. They're going to hoard all of that for themselves, and they're all going to fuck the U.S. over in the next natural disaster or world pandemic or whatever, because they know that the U.S. is like self-interested in that way.
My issue is they already did this, right? China has shown that they literally hoarded.
So the reason why we didn't have all those N95 masks and not insulators, not inebriators, ventilators, is because we had no leadership to think that it was a serious problem and try to get this stuff ahead of time.
But for the record, he did to some degree, at least at the beginning of his administration, think it was a serious problem. Otherwise, he wouldn't have thrown trillions of dollars behind Operation Warp Speed. So clearly, he thought COVID was a bad problem.
But I'm saying that if Donald Trump, as soon as the WHO...
He did think it was a problem, not probably for the American people, he's kind of selfish,
sure,
but for his economy.
I'm saying that as soon as the United States started to take shit seriously, we got the shit we needed, right? Like, I think the United States can spin up manufacturing for a lot of stuff if we need to, depending on the thing. But for N95s in the United States, I feel like we must be able to do that, right?
Yeah, but like we do lack a lot of those facilities to be able to produce these things, right? And like the issue is like when we're relying on China for a lot of this like type of stuff, it becomes an issue when we come with supply. And yes, the U.S. can amount to that, but we shouldn't have that delayed of response and that issue. Even if it's like, let's say, we were able to rebuild and like scale up our factories to produce N95s in a month.
Sure.
There should have never been that month in the first place taken too, because those people are dying. Our citizens are dying. Our people are dying too.
So I think...
Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, it shouldn't be...
So I understand what you're saying, and I think
for key industries, let me say this, for key industries, I don't think we should be making Temu socks. Like that's ridiculous.
Okay, so if that's the position you want to take, then I would say that you've completely abandoned Trump's position, and that's more or less that could be my position. If somebody wants to say there are certain types of industries that we should protect, like stuff related to agriculture, like food, animal ag, stuff related to defense, that we should have some protection on these industries, because it would be pretty silly if we imported 100% of our jet fuel or rocket fuel from China, if that's like our next big military opponent. Then I would say, like, of course.
There's examples like that are time again.
But that's not bringing back manufacturing in any capacity to like go back to the glory days. That's just saying that we should be protectionist around some national defense industries. That I think makes sense. But you recognize that's a total departure from Trump's tariffs.
Well, if I wanted to further expand on that position, I think it's important even to return all types of manufacturing to the United States, right? Because with certain advents in automation and the way automation has progressed so much, like it's becoming easier and easier for machines to take on tasks of humans. So it's easier and easier for the United States to produce goods and compete with China as a manufacturing power, right? Which is important, because what won us World War I and World War II? It was the fact that the United States could shift over consumer industries into production of military products, right? We're looking at the Ukraine war right now. Why do they not have shells? Why are they struggling? Why did we have to sell so much of our old stockpile instead of our new one? Well, A, you could look at the obvious reason, which is the fact that like we don't want to give them our new toys. But B,
what else?
We need to be able to rapidly reproduce our like equipment and stuff. Like we don't have the capacity here.
But how did we win World War II against Japan?
By literally shifting over our manufacturing facilities for consumer goods to military.
Yeah, but what was the thing that ended the war?
We went to total war economy.
It happened twice.
With what? Oh, well, the bombs. But
so that's a high
for the record,
productivity.
That's not why.
True. But that was a stated reason. It played into the fear factor in the world, okay? And it was probably a good thing. But
for the record, the Japanese generals and the king, not the king, the
emperor.
The emperor literally said they could nuke us 4 to 5 more times and we wouldn't care. Like the government was so bad that
I understand this. They were worried about the Soviet.
I'm just saying, like,
they were worried about the Russians were going to come.
I have a feeling you're going to argue that our specialized industries were like what helped us win the war.
I think our specialized industries are really important. Yes.
Yes, I'm not denying that they aren't important.
But I don't think that we can have it all. I think that sometimes, like, I make fun of socialists and uber progressives when they think that we could have free healthcare with the same level of access and the same level of benefits for every single person. There's no resource strain. And conservatives make fun of them too for saying that. But then when we talk about manufacturing, we think that we could magically manufacture every single thing in the world that we import from every other country in the world, that we replace the entire world's working population with our own automated factories. And my question is, realistically, what do you think we have to give up to do that? Do you think we can do that at no cost?
I mean, to some degree.
To some degree, we could do that at no cost.
To some degree.
I would call it a
I will say,
fantastic delusion.
I'm not saying like I think we can go full autocracy. There's some things.
No, but
I'm
you're
not
saying we do like
can grow.
95%?
No, well, a certain percentage. Obviously, that's what I'm advocating for, and that's what I believe like the overall administration's position is, that they should be pushing more towards more and more of our stuff being produced here. And when you're so entwined with other countries and business ventures, right? Let's say the majority of our manufacturers over in China are American capitalists, right? They benefit directly from that trade. They're not going to agree with the fact when Donald Trump says, hey, we want to return manufacturing to the States. They're going to look at him like he's crazy because they're economically benefiting from it. The only way to really pull out the rug from a system like that is to mass tariff all these other countries, to cause harm on businesses, to force them to rebuild manufacturing.
So that's a chain of logic that I would say breaks at every single link, okay? That I understand the argument, but I think it breaks almost at every single link.
In what way?
In all the ways. But so like my general overarching question, or my general overarching thing looking at this, right? And then we can go link by link if you want. But like in the entire world, every other person wants to be the U.S. economy. Yes. We have one of the highest productivity workforces in the world. We have some of the highest technological capabilities of anybody in the world. We have some of the highest, like, in terms of research and development. Like, everybody, like, China is not saying, like, oh my God, I wish we could have even more manufacturing, right? China is saying, like, we're stealing all of your intellectual property because we want to make the shit that you make, right? Some countries have gotten trapped in, like, the manufacturing, like, the sinkhole, like Germany has had issues of, like, trying to escape this, right? And then when you look at, like, what's available in the U.S. in terms of, like, say, our educational institutions that also, like, add on a lot of productivity workers, like, everybody in the world comes to the United States for this.
Here's the problem.
So my question is, like, so the U.S. has, like, one of the highest productivity workforces. We do some of the highest tech and everything.
Yes,
and we import all of our, like, manufactured stuff from other people. So much so that, like, lefties in the U.S. and all the other countries sometimes like, fuck you guys, like, you're taking advantage of us when you do this. In what world where the U.S. is, like, obliterating everybody economically, technologically, intellectually, in terms of, like, the students and everything else, that we're looking at them, we're like, God, fuck, these guys are taking advantage of us. I want to be more like them. Like, what, if you can name one other country that we should try to be more like who are we even looking at?
I mean, it's tough because America charts its own course, which is something I strongly believe. So
America does its own what?
America charts its own course, like historically. Like we've always been different from every other country in the world. I strongly believe that, right? I'm very patriotic, very conservative.
But we don't just chart we lead, right? Like people want to be more like us in a lot of ways.
Yeah, because of the directions we take. And when we look at the state of the world right now.
So then why would we go backwards?
Well, because you have to look at the critical issues that we're facing around the world. We can't properly supply Ukraine. Why? Because we don't have the capability we used to during World War II.
No, that's not true. We can't properly supply Ukraine right now because we don't have the political will to do so.
I mean, to some degree, yes and no, because under the Joe Biden administration, we struggled to supply them with shells. Europe struggled to supply them.
But we also didn't have the political will.
I mean, it's just the truth, though. We did not have the and we probably still don't have the manufacturing capacity to supply a war. And then if you look at what's happening with Israel, too, it split our manufacturing even harder. And that's because we have such a weak manufacturing base here.
So the manufacturing in the U.S. has been higher than it's ever been. Our output has been higher than it's been in all of U.S. history, number one.
Yeah, but not when it comes to conventional...
Yeah, because we don't have the political will for it. But if we wanted to...
But we did under the Biden administration.
No, we didn't. We literally had to fight under whether or not the immigration bill was going to be tied to the Ukraine funding, and all the Republicans decided that they hated Ukraine because Donald Trump said it. Like we were so divided under Biden on how we were going to support Ukraine.
Okay.
We never had the combined political will to say like this is a project that we're going to invest in. We're going to start like manufacturing this direction. We're going to head.
We couldn't because we don't have the facilities here, which is what I'm highlighting. You can't say that we could have just bound together. Like we did have the political will behind it. You can't have political will. It takes 5 to 10 years, which is, one of the issues with a lot of economists that said with Trump's tariff plan.
Even if we were to assume that it would take that long to make sure, let's assume that what you're saying is true, which, by the way, we wouldn't have to be the ones to make them. We could get our allies, when you have friends in the world, we could even make them, right? And then, like, be a part of that supply chain or just, like, commanding that or subsidizing it or whatever, right? Because we had friends all over the world that could also make stuff as well, so they were part of our, in a way, connected economy as well. But let's say that it's like, oh, God, it's 5 to 10 years where we could make shells for Ukraine. How many generations would it take to manufacture every single thing that we're importing then? Because that sounds like that would be like a multi-generational project to even approach all of the imports we get from everybody else around the world.
Are you talking about like military-wise? Or
everything-wise, what Trump wants to do, what you're advocating for?
I mean, when you think about like the economic benefit of like, let's assume robotics continues on the path it's going, AI is continuing on the path, automation is incredibly beneficial. If we're able to massively just output things as cheap as possible to other countries without having to sacrifice human capital, which is incredibly important when it comes to like, building, your next military development, right? That is incredibly beneficial to the United States because now Europe, our ally, doesn't have to rely on China for manufacturing their goods. any of our allies, India, does not have to rely on China for manufacturing their products. They can come to the United States for manufacturing, and we get to strengthen and consolidate our power around our other nations, which is the benefit of returning our manufacturing.
But we don't have the ability to manufacture that much stuff.
That's what I'm saying. That's what we have to return. That's why the tariffs force our factories overseas, right?
So why don't we do it now?
What do you mean?
Why don't companies just make it now or start making the factories to do it now without the tariffs? Why wouldn't they have done it before?
Because they directly benefit from like the financial returns that they're getting from like having their factories over on cheap production there. And
Correct.
There's no incentives right now for the government. Like if I'm a factory owner in China, I'm producing tons of goods. There's no fucking incentive for me to just pack up my entire shop, move it over to the States. That's fucking insane.
Correct.
Right?
Because it would be way more expensive.
Yes, but that's because there's already buy-in to the Chinese government, right?
And because it's cheaper.
Yeah, but when you're hosting our manufacturing hubs in a foreign country that's adversarial to us and is like literally planning invasions to our ally that could potentially drag us into a war like Taiwan, that is miserable and horrible for like the future of...
Doesn't it give us more leverage to like negotiate like a non-violent confrontation? Like wouldn't China be worried about losing all of the U.S. foreign direct investment and everything else?
No, because last time this happened, because they are a different government, they're not a free trade government, they just clamped down on any of their billionaires that tried to leave the country and flee the United States. We saw multiple of them disappear. All their banks, they froze American assets and companies.
They would lose the foreign direct investment from the U.S. and if we have strong allies, our allies too. Also, we don't have to just import from China. Other people can make stuff for us as well.
Yeah, I mean, I do think India is on the way to start producing things, but like I'm saying, I think it would be good for the United States to return like their manufacturing base because we want to be able to also, like during World War II and World War I, be able to rapidly convert these factories to wartime economy. The reason why the United States won the war in World War II wasn't because of the fact that we produced the best tanks. Our tanks were dog shit. But for every 1 to 2 Panzers, there's 10 more American A1 tanks pulling up. You can't win a war when you can outproduce your enemy, and that's what happened time and time again during World War II and World War I.
The reason why our production was so good, though, is because we also weren't like in a war-torn Europe, and we were basically untouched, and we were able to deploy our entire population towards like manufacturing.
Yeah, and that war-torn Europe, like when Britain's industries were destroyed by Luftwaffe bombing 24/7, who was sending the tanks over? Who had the mass supply of tanks that were able to produce here because of our manufacturing?
Yeah.
Like, this is the thing, right? Like, we need our manufacturing hub here.
But are you willing, like, here's the issue. I'm going to repeat this.
Okay.
Are you willing to pay the economic cost in doing so? Because you seem to think that we could bring all of our manufacturing back here and more or less the standard of life would be the same. You need to understand that if we were to bring it all here, I'm not going to say that's impossible. We could do it, but it's going to come at a substantial cost to our standard of living. Everything is going to be more expensive. Cars are going to be 2x, 3x, 4x the cost. Houses are going to be more expensive.
But why would it be more expensive?
Because now that we're manufacturing it here, we're necessarily going to be paying a higher cost. American wages are higher. The factories are going to be more capital intensive. Whatever else we have to.
Well, like I said, with advancements in automation, and I've heard you argue many times that a lot of the jobs that we're going to benefit from the manufacturing process are just going to be replaced by automation in the first place. So that cuts down on that's a huge.
By the time that becomes economically viable to do it, the investment will be there for it. We don't need a tariff. The reason why you tariff is because you're saying we know that it's cheaper to make it over there, so now we're going to artificially make it more expensive, so that now it's cheaper to make it here. But it's only cheaper to make it here because you've artificially, whatever 1.5x the price of what it would cost to buy from over there.
Well, there's a scare though with the fact of Chinese ability to like mass manufacture, right? Like the way that they control what our exports and imports are, because we're so closely tied to them, because, with the policy we pushed for China after the fall of the USSR is to really integrate them in the U.S. economy, that when they turn hostile to us, we're now crippling ourselves in many ways.
I don't think we're crippled. We still
a couple more minutes there,
right?
guys. I hate to break this up. This is awesome. Just a couple more minutes.
Sure, yeah. I mean, like China, am I wrong? Isn't China like 13 or 14 or 15% of our total imports market? Like we import from other people as well.
Yes, we do. I'm just saying, like, when you have important sectors, like...
No, that's not the argument you're making. If you want to talk about important sectors, I can agree with you there, but you're talking about the entire... everything. We should be an autarky, basically, or as close as possible to one. But that necessarily hurts our relationship with every other country on the planet. It necessarily is going to lower our standard of living, unless you think we can just magically produce everything here at no additional cost, in which case I would have to ask, why aren't companies doing it already? There's a reason why those tariffs have to go into place.
Well, I mean, I argued the reason why those companies aren't doing it in the first place is because they already have too much investment and capital tied up in foreign countries. You're not just going to pick up your entire production and run it back here. Even if, let's say... I understand it, but I'm saying if the cost is changing initially, right, it's going to eventually balance out, right? Nobody's going to wait for it to be, oh, God,
God, like now it's all changed, now we're going to move. If it's going in that direction, if you're saying that manufacturing is heading in that direction, like a capital investment is largely, depending on what you're talking about, it's like a one-time big investment thing. At some point, you're going to get your return on investment is going to be cheaper for your marginal cost of production to produce here, even if you've already got an investment over there. That will change over time on its own. If you're massively speeding it up with a tariff, or if you're massively forcing it to happen with a tariff, then it's implying that there's no way that the United States could manufacture stuff here. Every single autarky experiment across the planet has failed. What was the country that tried, was it Argentina that tried to make their own blackberries? Anybody remember this econ article a long time ago? It was.
You could look at Germany trying to produce their own oil too. It went
sure, like
wrong,
I mean that's a natural resource extract from the ground. Unless
I'm just saying, like they tried to become very independent from the global.
Sure, I'm just saying that like everything
structure.
that we do with trading with other countries, it strengthens those countries, it strengthens our relationship with those countries, it strengthens our consumer market, it gives us a higher standard of living. Like there are so many positive like knock-on effects from this that to throw all of that away, and then especially when Trump has the audacity to claim that the reason why he can do this is because the U.S. has the best consumer market. We have the best consumer market because we have the highest productivity workforce, because we import so much like lower level stuff from other countries that allows our workers to fixate and specialize on higher productivity stuff. So the idea that he's saying we have the hottest market ever, yeah, because we have free trade, which he's trying to destroy, and we've got a high productivity workforce that he wants to trade for a low productivity one. So it's like, yeah, you're talking about all these amazing things we have, but we have them because we're a certain way, and you want to go back to the other way.
I guess.
Final thought there, Tristan.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess the one really big highlight I would push forward is the fact of, like, you talked about the theft of our intellectual property. That's happening because we have our manufacturing over in China. They are catching up to us in their specializations because we're manufacturing in China. If we pulled back a fair bit, even like 90% of our stuff, they wouldn't have so much mobility to capitalize on our benefits.
Sure. Final retort, and then he can get the final retort. Okay, the only reason, again, why I don't like this argument is because let's say, for instance, that was the goal, right? If China was the goal, then why not just target China and strengthen your relationship with everybody else? Like, if China was the enemy, then Mexico and Canada should be our best friends. But we're making enemies out of everybody.
I mean, you do have to look at the fact that Trump has come down on certain tariff policies after certain imports were. He did, right? Like it is absurd, some of the rates and tariff policies. But he
I
did
understand
come
what
down.
you're saying, but it's
Yeah.
like this guy stopped like raping his friend, so now they're like more chill. Like the terrorists came out of nowhere. They were a big slap in the face to the entire fucking planet. He held up a chart with other terrorists from other countries that was a fucking lie. That chart was just a lie, right? You acknowledge that was a lie.
Yeah,
The
no,
president-
I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm not.
So the president of the United States lied to the entire world and lied to every other person when he was saying in his own country that these were the tariff rates that everyone else on us. And it's like, well, he took some of them down.
Well, I mean, when like the problem is like you highlight the fact that the United States is this amazing global like superpower, and the fact that we rely on our trade so much, and the fact that we import. That's one of the benefits that everyone is so reliant on us, right? That like we're able to strong arm other countries into trade deals, right? But what I'm highlighting here is, from my perspective, we have to be very concerned about, and this is where the conservative angle comes in, about the negatives that come from that, right? The theft of our intellectual property. China is catching up to us militarily and intellectually. You can look at all the manufacturing, right? We go through this list. There are serious negative trade-offs that do have to be addressed by moving a lot of our industries over, and the only way you can really force these companies where there's no investment capital here for it, right, because they don't want to, because it's cheaper over there and they have benefits to it, and they already have investments there, it would take them 5 to 10 years probably even to like pick up all their stuff and just be like, okay, we can move it back now that we made a return. You want to speed that up because there's concerns about Chinese dominance.
You're assuming it'll happen, and also none of this is being passed legally, so it's all just going to go away with the next president, so nobody's going to even make that investment in the United States, and we're destroying our relationships with everybody else too. So like, if the goal was to target China, we're going about it in possibly the worst way we could ever do it, ever.